Today's developments around our energy crisis in South Africa. I am joined in studio by Vuslat Bayoglu. He's the managing director of Menar Capital, a private investment company in mining and resources. Thank you so much for your time here on All Angles. Now, firstly, tell me what you think about what happened today. Quite ceremonial, a positive direction for South Africa?
I'm not really sure about it because I personally think that renewable energy is complementary when it comes to energy mix, but it doesn't really solve the load shedding problems. Because South Africa has got a demand of 32 gigawatt. Okay, and then capacity of Eskom at the moment is available capacity is 26 gigawatt.
Yeah.
And it has been ongoing for a while, and we are talking around the periphery, but we're not trying to solve the problem and going into the core of the problem, and this is since 2008. So I was very surprised to hear like what Thabo Mbeki was commenting yesterday, and actually the whole problem started during his time not making a decision about adding capacity to the grid. Now, current issue of load shedding is not going to be solved by signing IPPs to get either power from wind or solar, because we are not learning lessons actually from the other parts of the world. If you look at Germany, they are sitting with, I think, 58 gigawatt of solar and 64 gigawatt of wind power. But they are in trouble. Their power prices shot up 10 times more compared to the crisis between Ukraine and Russia. Why? Because gas is cut. Gas is their bread and butter for the base load.
They had to actually even go back to using the same coal that they're trying to get away from.
Exactly, because they need base load. So South Africa needs base load, and actually Minister Mantashe like explained this so many times that we need to invest in coal. We need to make sure that we got a base load, because we don't have gas. We don't have enough in our budget to invest further in nuclear power. If possible, nuclear power can solve our problems as well. But coal is our bread and butter at the moment regarding base load. So if South Africa adds 20,000 megawatt of solar or wind power, that's not going to solve our problem. So South Africans should not be hopeful of, okay, look, we signed IPPs, next year or in 2 years' time our problem is not going to be solved. It's going to be solved. It is not going to be solved. That's the reality.
Yeah. So tell me, okay, so coal, like the minister is saying, shouldn't be something that we step away from completely. He does say that it's an industry that needs to still be protected because it contributes to the South African economy, etc., and that we shouldn't move completely away from it. Right. But we've heard before Eskom saying the coal is wet, for instance, when it's rainy season and we go into load shedding, and then they tell us that the coal is wet. So is it also another issue of the construction of our power stations being incorrect?
Look, I don't think so, Maseko. The main problem is that Eskom comes up with different excuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different times. Okay.
I agree.
So 5 years ago it was wet coal.
Yeah.
Currently it is sabotage.
At some point it was the strike.
Exactly, but at the end of the day, the people, ordinary citizens like you and me on the street, we can't go home. When you go to hospital, you can't get the service because it's load shedding. If you're running a smelter, you can't get power. So, I mean, in a country where you need 32 gigawatt and then you got 26 gigawatt only producing, there's a problem. So let's not hide behind certain excuses. Let's deal with it. I think it's a competency issue as well. Because Eskom's current problem, and actually President Ramaphosa addressed this in his previous address of the power crisis. Eskom's current power stations need to be maintained. Even though they're old, they're aging, but that's what we have to do. So we have to ask the question ourselves, like, why is Kusile giving us problems? Kusile is a brand new power station.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Medupi.
And Medupi, same story. And how can we carry on running Hendrina or Komati instead of like demolishing Komati and putting like 100 megawatt solar capacity, which is going to work for 6 hours a day? We don't need that power now. We need to solve the problem, because we have an urgent problem, and that can only be solved if we can maintain the boilers. So we need a very strong engineering team to deal with the maintenance issue of the boilers. It has to be strict like compliance regarding the maintenance.
So what are you saying about the engineers that are with Eskom now? Because they can't seem to be, to be able to deal with the issue of our boilers having leaks and then generating units, going out every single morning, to find ourselves at stage 6, every single morning Eskom's statement would talk about 3 different power stations with new generating units that have tripped. So what are you saying about the engineers currently with the parastatal?
I think we have got great engineers, great people trying their best at Eskom, be it power station managers, be it procurement, be it purchasing guys on the coal side. I think they're trying their best. The problem is the decision making. I think we have to make sure as a country, our politicians do not politicize our security of power, because security of power is critical for us. Remember, we are a nation that needs to create jobs.
Yeah.
But we can't power the nation.
No.
So first we need to power the nation, and then if you need investors, you need to give them cheap and available power so that they come and invest in the country. So this is the most critical issue. And I actually shared a friend of mine who's in media sector. I said, when President Ramaphosa became president, I said, if I was his advisor, I was going to tell him,
first thing,
spend the time at Megawatt Park.
Yeah.
Because if you don't spend the time at Megawatt Park, if you don't solve Eskom problem, we're going to end up like what we are facing now. Because we need new capacity to be invested. And like I said, renewables is great. We have to invest and we have to follow the trend in the world. But it doesn't solve the problem.
It's not too late for him to take that advice. I mean, he's got 2 years. To convince South Africans that the ANC deserves to still be at the helm, because at the moment the party's legacy includes this crisis of Eskom, unfortunately, in terms of the young people that live in the country today, But, we've had a conversation, for instance, with the former CEO of Eskom, Mr. Jacob Maroga, quite a couple of times, and he was CEO there until around 1999. And they won an award back in 2001 as one of the best, parastatals or state-owned entities, etc. That was during his tenure. And he was saying that Eskom does have about 6,000 megawatts of power. So I'm assuming that it's the 26 versus 32 difference. Right. He says they do have that power and the capability of putting the country back on. It's just the issue of actually getting that 6,000 megawatts of power back on the grid.
Right. He's right.
So what do we do? I mean, it's been years. If we have never been able to get that 6,000 back on the grid for so long, changing leadership so many times along with the board, they've failed in that instance. What's next then? What should they try next? Okay,
let's say if we are talking to President Ramaphosa now,
absolutely.
If he's asking our views about like what we can do in terms of this crisis. I'm an engineer by profession, mechanical engineer. I would have told President, let's deal with the immediate issue. The immediate issue cannot be solved by renewable capacity to be increased. Immediate issue can only be solved by maintaining the boilers. That is the only way to solve it. And then maybe South Africa can think about buying power from neighboring countries. If Botswana or Mozambique or Zambia have got excess capacity, we may consider getting whatever we can get. If it's 100 megawatt, 100 megawatt.
Our problem is also in Mozambique, part of our problem.
It will help, whatever we can get from them. But that is going to deal with the immediate issue. The secondary issue, which is medium to long term, this country needs to decide about where is the base load going to come from. Because in his previous address, the President decided to support renewable plus battery, renewable energy plus battery. That's very expensive, and you can't actually power a nation, an industrialized nation like South Africa. You can't. I mean, you can't run a smelter with solar power. You can't. And putting batteries are very expensive, and there is no example like that in the world. That's why I'm saying that we need to learn from Europe. If base load is not available, be it nuclear, be it gas, the whole Europe is in trouble. They're in darkness. So their power prices, that's why their power prices are so high. So we should not repeat the same mistake. What we have is coal. We need to invest in clean coal technologies. We need to invest in new technology. Like China is building power stations. India, Bangladesh, Pakistan.
Well, China's very good at building stuff. I mean, you saw what they did during the COVID-19 pandemic. They were able to put up a whole hospital and demolish others where they thought that the infection was rife. We don't have that money. And also the scary thing about South Africa is the corruption that we know our government is susceptible to. So the minute you start talking about building a power station, like it happened with Medupi and Kusile, we saw how 6 years became more and more and more, and the budget kept swelling. So I think that's also the other issue, managing, actually putting people there who can, not be susceptible to the corruption and make sure that the projects happen at the time frame that they promised. But thank you so much for speaking to us here on eNCA. That was Vuslat Bayoglu. He's the Managing Director of Menar Capital. He's also an engineer by profession, just giving details on what he would advise President Cyril Ramaphosa for us to avoid these blackouts in future. Still to come on